That's the beauty of a Spring Beauty. That's how big they are. Not that small, but not that big either. And I wrote a poem called Spring Beauty Patience. So I'm going to read that poem to you. And then James is going to talk to you about something. So I'm not feeling really healthy today, but healthy enough that I'm actually getting out. So I'm hoping the fresh air will help me out a little bit, and making sure that I wear a mask when I'm around other people. But
not around me, but she caught it from it. It's amazing how small
we should show
weaker
your
reaction I had to it. I had like a kind of a not really plugged up ears.
Yep.
For less than 2 days, and then 4 days of just anytime I got a chill, my nose would get running, but it wasn't running.
So James has the spinach salad with some pumpkin seeds, those red long peppers and violets from the garden, and some bulgogi BBQ gravy on the potatoes, which just slid down, and raspberries and a coconut cake that I decided I may as well let him have some because I can't taste it anyway. And
that's a real sacrifice.
This is going to go to the dogs, but I'm going to have to pick through it and make sure I didn't miss some onion. Yeah. And this sauce, I just save it for James to be gravy. So yeah. I'm going to talk about Psych, the complete collection, a little bit, and it looks like that's what James is going to talk about.
It's a preview, actually. Dorthy L say it.
Yeah. So
I started reading the first story, and the only other thing I've read by her, I figured it out. You know, I don't figure anything out. Movies, whatever, detective novels. And now I'm reading the first story, and I figured everything out so far. I'm like, wow. Anyway, there we go. She's supposed to be.
I noticed you bought a whole bunch of them from the.
Cheapo. But yeah, 10 of them. So worth it.
Anyway, so here's Spring Beauty Patience, which I wrote April 22nd, 2024. So I think that was yesterday.
Yeah, it should be. It's the 23rd today.
Kind of out of it, so I don't know. Sweet Spring Beauty's a Scilla with blooms that are blue. This plant's commonly grown and reliable too. Where these beauties are planted, they'll bloom every spring, and their blooms are long-lasting, like pleasures they bring. My spring beauties are up and look lovely, but I haven't bothered to sniff them each time I've passed by, very rarely. I've mostly been laid up in bed with a cold that stuffed buckets of snot in my head. When I see them, I'm not disappointed, since I know my cold won't outlast my sweet Scillas. They're why I feel blessed with incentive to finally heal. Nature's beauty enhances the beauty I feel as I lay here in bed for another long day I'll spend sleeping. Though April creeps closer to May, once I'm healthy, its scent will smell I missed a line there. Though April creeps closer to May, there's no rush, since my beauty's a long-lasting treat. Once I'm healthy, its scent will smell all the more sweet. There you go. I just missed some stuff there, because I'm not well. So it's easy for me to make mistakes. But anyway, the dogs are very excited because I had enough energy to cook them some meat, so lucky them. And I guess I'll talk a little bit about
Psych.
Is
that the funny one?
That's what I've been,
Yeah, how many seasons is that?
So much.
There seems to be a lot of shows.
Well, this is a 32-disc set, and most of the discs are full, like they're 3 hours long, so this is a whole lot of TV.
Are they half-hour shows, like comedies, or are they hour-long?
Well, not quite an hour, but yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because it seems like all I hear is well, there's some good jokes, but then I'll hear the theme song, and then I'll hear the theme song again.
Yeah.
Okay.
which we'll talk about a bit more tomorrow, because I haven't finished it yet. I've just started season 8, and that's the last season out of this. So
this was about 10 years ago, 15. Doesn't matter.
I watched the movie first because it's in the package first, but actually you should watch the movie last. When I watched the movie first, I thought, what have I gotten myself into? Because the movie wasn't nearly as the guy who made the show did a good job making the show. It was very entertaining. I laughed many times. But I don't think he was really up to writing a movie. I mean, it's a different thing, writing a movie.
Yeah, it's like the difference between doing a sprint and doing a marathon thing.
So I don't know. It's just it's different.
What did you think of X-Files, the movie, or the movies?
Well, I like them more than not the series. No, the series I like more.
How about Twin Peaks?
But I like them more than I like this, and I like the Twin Peaks movie more than I like this movie.
But Twin Peaks movie, how would you compare it with the show?
Well, let's see. I suppose. I mean, that's interesting because, like, it's one thing. The guy who did this, what's his name? Steve Franks, I guess. He did the theme song and stuff, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. I hope I'm feeling better so that I can talk about things a little more. But anyway, and I guess there's other people involved in making the show, but honestly, I haven't really had the time to look into it. I've been laying in bed, and there were 2 days I was so sick I couldn't even watch TV. So, so this is basically all I've been doing, just laying in bed. Trying to recover. And
it's a tough, long cold. This is the 10th day, and she's still feeling it. So they used to say colds lasted 7 to 10 days.
Day, isn't it?
Okay, so you're saying it started Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's 7.
Yeah.
So you start a new count. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
It's still going. I thought I was feeling better, but then once I got out and tried getting food and stuff, I was feeling sniffly and stuff again. So it's hard for me. It's hard when you're sick and you've been laying around for so long. You want to get stuff done, or at least I do. I really like moving. I got to keep moving, and it's tough being laid up. So anyway, back to this. They did an episode. They do all sorts of episodes. They have all sorts of actors in here, and they'll play with the theme song. So they'll have they had one that it was Indian sounding theme song, and then they had one. They had a bunch of different ones anyway. But my favorite one was the one with the Tears for Fears guy episode. One of the two Tears for Fears guys was in this show a couple times actually. It comes back in a later episode, but the first one. Anyway, so they did a show about they spoofed Twin Peaks.
That one seemed pretty good, eh?
It was okay.
I could hear it.
I mean, what I liked about it is that they got so many of the actors that had been in the original, and you could tell, that they were trying to spoof it, whatever. But so I did like that, But honestly, when the series was out, I didn't watch it. I thought, why are some people into this? It's just a soap opera. But then once you watch it religiously, you watch it one after the other, and you don't miss, then you realize that, yeah, it's really something. It's not just a soap opera. It's the best soap opera. So, yeah. Anyway. And that didn't come across in this show or anything, because the makers of this, they're not David Lynch. They're not capable of that. But they were capable of pulling off a spoof, so like a Weird Al Yankovic sort of version of it. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is very funny. This is very well done that way. It's a comedy show about a psychic detective that's not actually psychic. He's faking it. His father raised him. His father was a detective and raised him to be to have awesome detective skills, right? Just leave it, it's fine. And so he's able to do this, and he does, and that's what he's making, how he's making his living. But I think that's all I can really do right now. That's enough for me. I gotta go lay it back down again. So now I'll put it over to James. He can talk a little while longer. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about this is that yeah, it's great. It's funny. It's you might think, oh, it's a comedy detective show. Well, it's not really. I mean, just like I better get that in.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, when the comedy detective shows aren't really detective shows, they're comedies. And maybe James will talk about that a little more or something. But I gotta go in, gotta get that in. And I gotta go in myself. So you go ahead.
Okay. Finish this mouth. So I picked up, as Pauline was saying, 10 Dorothy L Sayers. Very much used. Was it from the library? Something like that. But it doesn't look as though it was part of their collection. I don't see any, call numbers on anything like that. I'm going to close this door. An occasional mouse slips in. So the house, I'm afraid they might use the porch as a first step towards getting into the house. So I just want to keep that closed. One mouse was so precocious as to slip into the house. Pauline was standing right in the doorway and just slipped between her feet. Anyway, Dorothy L Sayers. As I was saying, I've read one of her novels previously. When I was a kid, something of an Agatha Christie fan. And I read a little bit of Marjorie Allingham. I can remember reading a Nio Marsh thing. I think that's how you mispronounce her first name. She's from New Zealand. She's probably very much dead. Anyway, Dorothy L Sayers, this book was originally published. It's a collection of stories. It looks as though there's a dozen of them. Originally published 1928, so it's almost 100 years old. And I've got to say, like I was saying, one novel of Dorothy L Sayers that I read a long time. I got it right away. It just kind of, I got to admit, I went through, read it, finished it, and just because to a certain extent I suppose I'm a completist or something like that. Anyway, it wasn't very good, and it's nice to know, having read a little bit about her, that at least one person appreciated her work, and that of course was herself. I think someone was saying she wrote a book maybe about, or an essay about how to write novels, and she wrote, or how to write prose fiction, something like that. And the examples she used were from her own work. It's like she could have been quoting from Henry James or from Charles Dickens or whatever. No, it had to be her. I think she really thought a lot of herself. was one of the crowd that hung around Ezra Pound. And they tended to be quite conservative. William Butler Yeats is another one. He actually had some talent, unlike Pound or Sayers. Another one was T.S. Eliot, and he had some talent for a while. And then he was spoiled by success, the success of The Wasteland, which was really a waste of paper, from what I can tell. Like, if you get hold of the originals of The Wasteland, there's a kind of a facsimile edition of it out. I'm pretty sure they don't keep it in print, but you should be able to get a second-hand copy of it. It's valuable to look at what The Wasteland was made out of, the raw material it was made out of. It was something like dedicated. It had a dedication, The Wasteland, published in 1922, to Ezra Pound. It's something like Il Miglior Fabbro, which I think means the better maker or something like that. So I don't know. He wasn't a better maker of poetry, Ezra Pound, than T.S. Eliot. Not even close. Ezra Pound's one of the worst practitioners of English poetry in the history of, well, the English language, not just of the last century or whatever. It was awful. And really bad influence on any variety of people. He was, I think, a fairly good influence on William Butler Yeats. Kind of encouraged him to write in a more prose-like fashion, I think. In other words, trying to leave out as much as possible for Yeats. Inversion, stuff like that. But he was a very bad influence, Ezra Pound was, on T.S. Eliot. So T.S. Eliot, I think by his own account, was having a nervous breakdown leading up to 1922. He's trying to put together what eventually became The Wasteland. I think he had this idea, he was maybe going to write his individual poems about what he was going through, or whatever. But it was all put together in a huge mishmash by Ezra Pound. And Ezra Pound went through, like he was saying, too penty. In other words, too much like pentameter. And get lost. He had no sense of rhythm, this idiot, Ezra Pound. T.S. Eliot wasn't the greatest with rhythm, but he was a pretty good practitioner, and something like, you might almost call it, well, I mean, he did two different types of things quite well. And one was in his first volume of poetry, 1917, I think it was. I think it was called Prufrock and Other Observations. And the two poems that stand out for me in that collection are The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock and what's the other one? Portrait of a Lady, I think it's called. Ezra Pound used that title. I think it refers to work by Henry James, maybe. Anyway, so that volume worked for me. And then I think they put one, Pound and T.S. Eliot put one out collectively together. Maybe 1920. And that, like, very different type of stuff for T.S. Eliot. They were both trying to have some rhyme and rhythm, but oh my gosh, the stuff that Pound put out in that stuff's horrible. No sense of rhythm, none. But that's some of T.S. Eliot's best stuff. It's very different from Prufrock and Portrait of a Lady. But, then Pound got hold of The Wasteland, and Eliot had a huge success with it. And T.S. Eliot kept on, it seems like, trying to reduplicate that success. And he went futzing off, pardon me, words almost in French, into like wishy-washy rhythms and stuff like that. You can see what it's like in his plays. Murder in the I think starting with Murder in the Cathedral, but he did a whole number of them, including one thing I think it was purporting to be a mystery story or something like that. It's awful stuff, really. I mean, I don't think it would be very good in a play. Doesn't on stage doesn't make for very good reading. I don't know what else you could use it for. Toilet paper maybe, but and T.S. Eliot every so like what happened when it's one thing when you're alluding to something and you're actually making up your own verse form or something like that, but when you're alluding to stuff you get little, so his poetry stuff tended to be little snippets taken from someone else. They call it allusion. You could call it plagiarism. When you're just taking them undigested and putting them into something that's supposed to be free verse, just the undigested snippets of things. It's not very good. I mean, some of T.S. Eliot's later poetry is G.O.D. awful. What can I say? And then he did attempts at wasteland type of stuff with, I guess it's about the last that he wrote, 4 quartets. I think some of it dated to a little bit before World War II. One of them definitely refers to stuff that happened in World War II, Little Kitty. But it's not very good. You can see that he has some talent in there, but the philosophical comes out, Philosophy is the death of poetry, and well, it's one of the deaths. There's many different deaths of poetry, but there's a lot of passages in the 4 quartets that just read like philosophizing. Maybe not that good philosophizing. I don't know. I do know that T.S. Eliot was pursuing some sort of, it must have been at Oxford, some sort of, no, it might have been Cambridge. He was hanging with Bertrand Russell, early, it must have been in the teens of the last century, and I suspect he was studying philosophy. I don't think his philosophy would have been very congenial to Bertrand Russell and vice versa. I think Eliot did his work on F.H. Bradley, who was, I gather, an idealist. I don't think I've ever read anything by F.H. Bradley. It'd be hard to get hold of some of this stuff. It's, I was mentioning him to a philosopher, and he was saying, well, do people even know he exists anymore? Something like that is what he said. This was in this millennium. Someone at the University of Lethbridge, and the University of Lethbridge seems to have a philosophy department that's largely, what would I say? Well, they probably think fairly highly of Bertrand Russell, and maybe Ludwig Wittgenstein. I mean, there's differences between those two. Maybe some more positivist kind of stuff, so on and so forth. Anyway, I don't think they'd have much truck with idealism. But T.S. Eliot seemed to, I think he was so serious about it, he was trying to study Sanskrit for a while. And I think he got probably pretty good at Latin, Greek. Apparently he's very good at French. One time, according to one anecdote I've heard, Eliot and someone, probably from English instruction, were in Paris and he jumped into a cab, and Eliot started jabbering to the cab driver in French, and the cab driver was just really, as the English say, chuffed to, what Paul McCartney used to say, to find out Eliot's French was that good. So Sanskrit apparently was a little less accessible to T.S. Eliot. Someone told me, and it might be the truth, that Eliot eventually just gave up on the Sanskrit. Sanskrit, you're dealing with another script, and it's much more other than, let's say, the script that you learn if you're learning Greek. And then you've got also, I mean, it's very different, even though it's Indo-European language. I mean, most of the vocabulary going along, you'd have no clue that it was an Indo-European language, you know, like in the sense that, oh, I recognize that, that's Indo-European, that's almost the same thing. Yeah. It doesn't work out that way usually. You know, some people have a really, really cockeyed view of what other languages are like because they've been taught here in Canada at least a little bit, some of them, some people, been taught a little bit of French, and they think, oh wow, you know, like we've got so many French words in the English language. Wow, you know, like it's so easy to learn another. Yeah, French actually is, its grammar is fairly similar to modern English grammar, modern French. Like the word order is important. But when you, even something like Latin has, as I've said before, it's a slight exaggeration, but pretty well every word in Latin is in English, taking it over. You've got something like I wouldn't necessarily call it pretentious, but highfalutin vocabulary in English. You're going to have a lot of Latin vocabulary. The trouble is the grammar. I can remember sitting down when I was a young and relatively foolish about some such things. I thought I got hold of the Vulgata. That's it was the standard Latin version of the Bible. For the Roman Catholic Church, it was the version. Up until maybe 1962 or something like that. And I thought, man, this is going to be easy. So I started off at Exodus, and I know that sort of. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And I was having trouble reading it because the word order wasn't there. I probably did pretty well on that, but on those first few verses. But eventually, you run into verses. I mean, you start dealing with stuff from Deuteronomy, the second law, or Numbers, starts up with the census. I mean, it's basically personal names, but you run into descriptions of what the temple was, or the tabernacle rather, how it was built, on and on and on it goes. All sorts of specialist kind of terminology and things like that. The curtains are this, you know, there's holding bars for the Ark of the Covenant and all this kind of stuff. You just get lost. And wow, the prophecy, what's going on here? You know, locusts and blood, the moon turning to blood and all this kind of stuff. People who, you know, like what I have done is taught myself German, supplemented by some courses taken at university. I can read it pretty well. Don't have to look up too many words. And this is I'm not talking about, you know, like specialist literature like archaeology or something.